Hi, this is How to Operate a Mixing Console, Part 1. I've broken this tutorial down into segments in an effort to make each segment as comprehensive as possible. And in this segment we're going to focus on the main mixing surface of the console, which comprises most of the top surface you see here. This particular mixer is a Mackie 2404. It's a fairly common mixer, and it's also very similar to mixers by other manufacturers. This is an analog mixer. It's designed primarily for sound reinforcement, but it can also be used for recording, and I've actually used this particular mixer for both. Now you're looking at a lot of knobs here, and what you want to keep in mind is as you look across the mixer horizontally, each knob in a horizontal row serves the exact same function, so it does the same thing from channel to channel. As you look up and down the mixer vertically, each vertical row of knobs affects one channel only, although they'll have different functions as you move your way down. And we'll start at the top of channel number 1 here, and the first knob you see is called the trim control. Now this control will adjust your input signal. Different signals may have different levels, and you want to be able to even those out across your input section. As you move down here all the way to the bottom, just above the fader, you'll see a signal present LED. This is telling me that I've got an active signal here, and I have applied a signal to this channel so you can see that. Now as I raise this trim control, now I've got a red overload LED, which is telling me I've got too much signal to the channel, and I'm going to back that down a little bit until I don't have an overload light, because that'll give me distortion. Right below the trim control is a series of knobs. On this particular mixer there's 6, and these are your auxiliary sends. Now the top one is a pre-fader auxiliary send. It's pre-fader and pre-EQ, which means that if you move the fader or any other controls in this channel, it's not going to affect the signal that's being sent from this knob. The same goes for aux number 2. It's set the same way. Now we're going to skip the middle 2 and go to these bottom 2 aux sends. These are set at post fader, so both of these will be affected if you move the fader or the EQ knobs, and those are good for an effects send. If you need to send a signal to a digital effects processor, you would use a post fader and post EQ send. Now back to the middle 2, these actually have a little button here. It's labeled pre, and if you depress that, it's pre-fader, so you can use them as a monitor send. If you pull that back out again, it's post fader, so you can use these as additional effects sends depending on what your requirement is. Now right below that is the EQ section, and there's 4 knobs in this section. The top one is your high EQ. That's what's called a shelving EQ, and that's at a fixed frequency. It's 12,000 hertz or 12K hertz on this particular model, and what that does is if you boost this, it'll boost everything from 12 hertz and up, and if you lower it, you know, below the central position, it will cut everything 12K and above. The next 2 are your mid EQ, and on this mixer you have what's called a semi-parametric, and the top knob in the midsection does the same as your high EQ. It boosts and cuts, but the one directly below that actually selects the frequency that you want to cut, so it's not at a fixed frequency. You've actually got a range of mid-range frequencies here that you can select to either boost or cut. Just below that is your low frequency control, and much like your high frequency, that's fixed. I believe it's at 80 hertz. And it's a shelving EQ, so it'll either boost or cut everything at 80 hertz or below. Now just below that low EQ knob is a low cut filter, and if you put this filter in, it'll cut everything below 75 hertz. So you can actually boost 80 Hertz and then cut everything off below 75. So that gives you a little bit more control over your low frequencies. Gives you quite a high degree of control over your mid-range frequencies, and some pretty usable control over your high frequencies as well. Now the last knob in this section is the pan pot. This will pan signals either left or right, just like on a stereo system, to send the channels either left or right, or at some point in between, or directly in between. Now just below that you've got a mute switch, and what that does is it simply turns the channel on or off. It's got a red LED indicator here to let you know that that channel is not active, and if it's not, whatever is being input to this channel will not be heard in your final mix. Just below that is a solo button. If you depress that, the same LED flashes to let you know the solo is activated, and what that's used for is your headphone mix. If you're listening to an entire mix on a set of headphones plugged into this mixer and you hit the solo switch, now you're just listening to this one channel. In case you're trying to troubleshoot something that doesn't sound right, you can pull out the rest of the mix and in your headphones just listen to one individual input. And of course the last thing in the row is the fader, and this is where you'll do your actual mixing. Your faders will probably be at various levels throughout your mix to get a good balance on whatever you're mixing. And right next to that are some routing options. You can either route to the sub bus or you can route to a left and right master, and we'll get into more detail on that in a later segment. So that's pretty much it. You set up each of these individual channels the same until you get up to channel 20. Now on this particular mixer, the last two faders are actually stereo inputs. So you can plug in a stereo source such as a CD player or an iPod, and you can actually have one fader that controls both the left and right channel. And you've got your pan pot here, so you can select more left or more right and balance that as needed. The rest of the knobs are the same with the exception of the EQ section. The EQ in this section, you have a high, you've got a high mid, and that's fixed. You've got a low mid, and that's fixed. And you've got a low frequency selector. The other thing you'll see that's missing is you don't have the low cut filter on these channels, because presumably you won't need that for pre-processed recorded music. Also on the EQ section, it tells you what cutoff frequencies you're selecting here, so if you're familiar with those, you can make decisions based on that information. So that's about it for the main mixing surface of the console. We'll get into some more detail on auxiliary sends and the master section down here on the end in future segments.